Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. We've got a micro episode for you today. I am Cory, one of your co-hosts, and I'll let my co-host introduce herself.
And I am Kim Ramadan.
Huh.
So this morning we were set to air an episode of the Coach Replay Show and to have a conversation. And this episode actually is about apologizing. And so ironically, we are starting this episode by offering an apology for those people who we may have offended. We're going to talk a lot about apologizing today, and all of the topics that we say and the points that we have connect to our initial apology that we're going to do at the top of this episode, which is a sincere, we apologize if we if we made you feel any sort of way about the episode that was set to air at 10 a.m. So we are coming live to you this afternoon. You might be driving home from your work day at this point, or close to doing that. And so we hope that you tune into this episode. But again, we're going to start off by apologizing for anyone that we might have offended earlier today.
Yeah, sincerely. So let's talk a little bit about what kicked this topic off for us. Was not the fact that we had an apology to give, but him and I are a part of many different kind of groups and coaching spaces online, and it just so happened that this has come up a few times in conversation. Kim and I have also both talked about our needs to give apologies in the past in our coaching. It's still something that has to happen from time to time, but we're going to present kind of three scenarios, and two of these were ones that were posted about in some of our online groups that we're members of. So scenario one, which is one of them, is I did something, I didn't handle something probably the best way, or I made a mistake. I know I did something that probably requires an apology. I was doing my best, but my best wasn't really the best at that moment. Scenario two is things just feel weird. I'm not quite sure what, but something's changed in this relationship, this partnership. I feel like I maybe have offended that person, or maybe it's something to do with me, but it kind of feels like something to do with me. And then the third, which was another scenario that was brought up in another group that I'm in, is I've been told by somebody that I offended or rubbed somebody the wrong way with one of my actions. I was just doing my job. I don't feel like I did anything wrong necessarily, but now that someone has brought it to my attention, should I apologize? In addition to should I apologize, which Kim and I are going to talk about why you should just apologize already, but also the question is like, how do I do that? One person online was like, do I get a gift? Should I buy a gift? What should that be? We're not handing out tennis bracelets to anybody. Let's just be clear about that. But we're going to talk a little bit about how you might conduct that apology. So Kim, you and I are both on the same page. Like, yes, apologize, right?
Yes.
Why is that so important?
There have been scenarios like you've pointed out where I clearly have done something that I'm not proud of. I know that. I've talked about that on this show, and that's like a very clear, you apologize, and how and when you do that is something that we'll discuss too. But I've also been in a situation where, or a situation that was brought up in the group that we're in was, I didn't know, but I heard from these people that this person's upset with me. And it's kind of a different scenario. I think in all three scenarios that you've brought up, there needs to be a conversation and likely an apology. Each one of those is handled, I think, a little bit different. But it doesn't hurt anything to apologize when you knowingly did something or didn't, or even if you didn't know. But I think a lot of what matters is the time in which you have that conversation and how that conversation is kind of planned out. We plan conversations all the time as coaches. I don't think that this is different. So the timing is important. If you are it's not a situation where you say to somebody, hey, I need to have a conversation with you. Can we talk after your second period? And then that person is worried the whole first period about like what happened, and maybe they're unsure themselves. It's not a conversation you pop in the morning and talk about and then have that person carry on the rest of their day, like with that on their mind. You have to be really careful about how and when you say that, when you do apologize. But in all three scenarios, I think an apology is warranted, in all three of those. So.
Yeah, and I think the reason why, because I did some of the, like, there were of course lots of responses to the scenario 1 and scenario 3 that were posted in our groups, which were everything from there was a wrong that happened, whether you did it intentionally or not, and you should apologize, to many people said don't do a gift, which I also kind of second. Like, I don't think a gift is necessary, but a sincere apology, which we'll talk more about. But I also, the reason I wanted to talk about this is I also saw an alarming number. It wasn't the majority, but alarming number of people say, no, you don't owe them an apology. Whether you meant it or not, you're doing your job. They need to toughen up. They need to, and that was alarming to me, right? So yeah, like, maybe I gave you feedback. I left you some feedback. I gave you some maybe something that was kind of hard for you to swallow, but it was based in truth and objectivity, and that hurt you. Not that I was doing it to hurt you, but you felt things about that, like shame and guilt and all of that, and you were offended. Does that mean that I shouldn't do that, push you and challenge you? As a coach, that's kind of what my job is.
Right.
But also, I need to take into account that this is a relationship. And if we are going to maintain trust and a partnership, then I need to be mindful that maybe there are different ways for me to go about doing something, or make sure that we're clear on our roles. So whether you were doing your job or not, whether you were in the right, you feel, or not, I think it's a bare minimum relationship thing that says, no question, you should have a conversation. And in that conversation, it might be an apology, or it might just be clarifying of, understandings about what our partnership is.
Yeah. And I think, the one situation that I've talked about several times on this show, which is more like your first scenario where you're like, I know I messed up, I need to go back and apologize. Is when I was kind of there's a couple times where I was asked in the first scenario, I was asked to kind of coach in a way that was very uncomfortable for me. And I knew in that moment that I was not coaching in the way that felt right to me, that felt good to me. I was kind of asked to push people to almost like a brink, and then that was considered success. And it was really hard for me to be in that position because I knew it wasn't right, but I hadn't had a whole lot of training before about what the right ways to coach were. Not that there was one right way, but that certainly was not it. And so there was a lot of apologies that I've made since then, and a lot of wrongs that I had to make right. But the other part of that scenario was like the change in my behavior moving forward. It wasn't enough for me to say, I'm sorry. I have to also not do that thing again. And so when I was given the opportunity to be in another position at a different place, and was presented with that same issue of like, this doesn't feel right, I don't feel like I'm being asked to coach in a way that I'm comfortable with, I left that scenario and made it very clear why I was leaving that scenario. So I am not going to be put teachers in that position or myself in that position again if I know it's not right. So just apologizing without changing anything isn't enough. Like, you have to also be willing to change your behavior and change what happened.
Yeah. And this is something that our colleague TJ Hoffman says all the time. The best apology is a changed behavior. It doesn't mean that we just don't have that uncomfortable conversation and I just start changing my behavior and maybe they'll notice. I do think a conversation is still an important part, because again, it's about clarifying trust and feelings, but then you have to do something from that. If I find from you that something, a way that I left a meeting or provided feedback, or maybe just my body language, again, I didn't mean to, but it was read differently by that person, then I need to say, I'm going to be more aware of that in the future, but know that if that does happen again, it's not that I meant to do that, or however that might go. So yeah, I think that's the best thing. So here's what we want to leave you all with. If you feel like maybe I should apologize, and I still apologize. I apologize for a lot of things. There's no shame in my game, but I also go back and say, hey, like I tried something new and it did not go well. And I probably should have told you I was trying something new before I tried it. And then we were just kind of in this awkward position. So sorry, but I do still want to keep trying that thing, right? I want to get better at it. Or, hey, that model lesson did not go as I thought it would. I'm sorry you had to watch that, but let's talk about how we can learn from that, right? So Kim and I, when we were thinking about the takeaways, aside from thinking about it's important for you to do it, just apologize. If whether you feel like you did something or not, it's a conversation you need to have the conversation, think about your timing and delivery, make sure that you are then changing behavior based off of that conversation. But if you need to get in the mood, we thought it'd be fun to leave you with a little playlist. So what we have for you in today's notes and takeaways is just a playlist of our favorite apology songs. Everything from Chicago to Adele to Cher. Outcast is one of mine that's on there. So check it out on the notes and takeaways. Be sure to download those. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us. And again, we'll tune in next week for another episode of the Coach Replay Show. But Kim, thanks so much for joining us. We haven't done a live one in a while. So
yeah, it's fun.
This was fun.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And have a great weekend.
Goodbye.
Now I got to remember how to stop recording. Oh, here we go.